Welcome to Movie and a Beer, everybody. This is Dan bringing us in, and we have a really amazing spy thriller fun film that we just watched. And I have a bunch of really awesome friends and co-hosts hanging out here to help us talk about that. So what did we watch?
Well, let's introduce ourselves first before we introduce the movie. I'm Aaron. I'm your offshore African island expert.
What?
This is Blake. I'm your Guy Ritchie expert. I'm keeping it simple.
And this is Brian, your weaponry of World War II expert.
Oh,
There you go.
what does all this mean?
It is the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yes.
It came out recently, 2024. Stars Henry Cavill, who, Superman to those that are youngin' who have only seen him as Superman.
He's also the one guy in that Mission Impossible who reloaded his arms.
Yes. So this is a Guy Ritchie film based on a Winston Churchill
Operation?
Special ops
that he did before special ops were really done during
Yeah,
wartime conflict. And so basically he had a bunch of guys who were criminals, former military, most of them, who ended up taking a fishing trawler all the way down to a port on the west side of Africa.
Fernando Po, small island by the equator.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Well, they had to
taking
do
out
this.
some fun stuff.
They had to do this because the Germans were throwing U-boats all out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And their port was actually in a neutral allied Spain.
Yeah.
Right.
A neutral country. They didn't want to draw into the war.
Right.
And Spain was neutral, but it's somewhat friendly to Germany in World War II, but like neutral diplomatically.
They were ruled by
Right,
Franco,
right.
a fascist.
Right.
Correct.
Cool. What a great
And-
thing to be.
Yep. Who is like still in power in like the late 70s.
Yeah.
Like, man, he's
Really?
a long time. Yeah.
Holy
cow.
He lived for a long time.
Yeah.
They should
Neither here nor there.
They
but-
should have stick Gus, Major Gus on him.
Yeah.
Right. So Major Gus is our protagonist. He assembles this like A team of
Dun, dun,
experts.
dun,
That's a
It
perfect
was like
comparison. It is like the 18.
18,
Right.
Ocean's 11. It's like a heist film because they steal something.
Right. Yeah, the whole start of the film is kind of assembling the crew, and each member has their specialty, just
Right.
like a heist film.
And,
Yeah.
and even in the introduction, so our hero is being tasked by his government, hey, we need you to do this. And by the way, there will be no official recognition.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
danger if you're caught by the enemy is obvious. And the danger if you're caught by
our
our own
allies
allies is we need plausible deniability, so
Yep.
we will
Yep.
disavow you.
Yeah.
And so
and
that makes it-
arrest you and jail you.
Yep.
And so it makes it doubly dangerous that they have to avoid not just the Axis, but they have to avoid the British Navy also.
Yes.
Which they don't, without spoilers, they don't entirely successfully do.
No. But so we.
I mean, if there was no conflict, it wouldn't be a movie. It's just stuff that happens.
Yeah, we knew what we were watching ahead of time, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be down at John's Marketplace in Southeast St. Paul," and went down there with the purpose of finding something to drink
Shout out to John's.
with this.
Well, and Britain makes like one or two beers.
One or two, and some of them we've had a few times. I decided to pick up some Newcastle Brown Ale, which this is not the import from England. This is the Newcastle Brown Ale that is Newcastle, but it's made here in the States. It's made both in Chicago and in
California. Yeah.
And this is the California version of it. But it is the recipe, but it doesn't necessarily... They sell it like it's an import, but it's not. But that's okay, because it's Newcastle Brown. It's the same recipe, quote unquote. And,
Right.
And we were going to do another British beer, but I was like, you know what? There's a whole bunch of interesting other beers that had the term land and sea or sea and something. And I was like, most of this movie, as I had read through the previews and a little about it, takes place on boats in the ocean. So I was like, something dealing with the sea seemed appropriate. So we ended up doing the Monterey Bay Football Club Land and Sea XPA, brewed by Alvarado Street Brewing.
I read
title-
FC is football club also too, and I'm not sure if that's legitimately what it is or
No,
not.
this is done in collaboration with the football club
Really?
in Monterey. Yeah, so it is the official beer of the club.
What
That's
an interesting
so cool.
marketing crossover. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So Monterey Bay.
Land and Sea.
These guys, we've had beers from them before. They make good stuff. You can find them pretty all over the place up here if you look for them. But we'll talk about those in a little bit. Both went
Nice.
really well. I think they were good choices.
Yeah.
But this is a really amazing piece of film.
This is a
I
fun
don't-
movie.
It's fun. It's a fun watch.
movie.
It's a fun watch.
I would characterize it. It's almost like Brian. I think you said it first. This isn't like a war buddy movie so much as like it's a heist movie.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a heist movie, and They also pay homage to the kind of spaghetti western genre, especially with the score, right? Because it kind of the score goes between kind of jazzy Ocean's 11 and the Man with No Name series with Clint Eastwood.
When you mentioned that, I noticed the whistle in the background as the guitars and drums are going. Like it is like a western right now.
Well, and I was trying to place if that was like something of like a Spanish sort of flamenco, a kind of that kind of influence.
It's a Ennio Morricone kind of score,
but it definitely is like spaghetti western. So it's like some elements.
I mean, they're going to a Spanish port,
right?
Yeah.
And
the way they gun Nazis down, it's like in a Western when the bad guys all show up, the heroes just grab chest, fall over, bow, 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 bow.
Or you get hit by an arrow and then pulled out and stabbed 5 other people with that same arrow multiple times. It's like, damn, dude.
I really enjoyed
John Wick. Here we go.
I really enjoyed Alan
Lawson. Yeah.
Oh, the actor's name, Alan Richardson.
It's an amazing. Some of the
These
action sequences
these are great.
Are incredible choreography.
Agreed.
There's a lot, as you've pointed out in the past, Blake, with cutting, lots of cutting.
There's a lot of cutting, which I can't recall. I feel like that's a Guy Ritchie move. I watched a lot of Guy Ritchie movies,
but I would say, contrary to earlier films by him, the pace of the cutting is actually a little bit slower.
It is.
I mean, there's a lot of cutting in the action sequences, but it's like once every second as opposed to 5 times a second.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
he
every 5 frames there's a cut.
Yeah, he's big into like the heavy hard zooms, music blasting, cut, like hard focus.
Right.
And this it's more it's measured. It's a bit calmer.
I was going to say, I didn't notice the cuts. And I know, like in earlier episodes, listener, if you've been with us in the podcast a long time, we've talked about, like frequent cuts in action sequences are easier to film because you have to remember less movement, less choreography, less, battle sequences. It's just easier for an actor to remember how do they move, what do they do with their body, and then how do they sell a hit. They only have to sell a hit successfully once if you're cutting after every hit. But if there's 3 or 4 in a row, that's harder to do. I didn't actually, like, I know it was cutting quickly, but I didn't notice. It wasn't jarring to me.
And I felt there was not so much cutting that it was distracting.
Right.
Like you could follow the action in the fight scenes, which is something everybody who's listened to this knows I like.
Right.
Yeah. There's not a lot of distraction. The scenery. So in talking about the setting, it takes place on boats.
Lot of
boats that are and are not moving.
Well, also HQ. It does take place. There are many scenes that are kind of in an HQ office for special services.
Yep. And you see Churchill at 10 Downing Street. You see him at his home. There's the scenes at the port where there's a nightclub and other buildings and things that are around that look like an old
casino bar.
That's right.
It's interesting that there's such a dichotomy there's a party. There's 2 parties that happen, one for enlisted and one for officers. And the officers, as we were mentioning while we're watching it, like they're wearing costumes.
Right.
Where the hell did they get costumes?
I mentioned
during World War II.
Right. In this Spanish colony in Africa.
Yeah. It was a hard stretch, but whatever. It's a fun film. It's not meant to be taken that seriously. It is based on supposedly something that really happened.
Right.
It turned the tide in the war, and that's why it didn't get declassified until fairly recently, and that's
2016.
Why it took a long time for it to then get turned around into a movie. I think they did a really good job. They were respectful of, say, the military and how they approached, like, everything has to be to code and to standard, and everything has to be done how we do it.
Guy Ritchie's a Brit. Like it feels like his version of when Sam Mendes did 1917. Because Mendes did 1917 to honor his grandfather in the First World War. This feels like Ritchie's version of that, saying, well, I think this is really cool. It can fit with my style. I want to send up all these amazing Brits that fought against the Nazis and made a huge effort to turn the tide.
Well, there is something to this idea of like superior skill and planning. And, having a dedicated team of highly competent people who are working together well, the power of that and how these can all be force multipliers that can be extremely effective, more effective than like the rank and file. But Blake, you had said something earlier about how before we started recording, you'd said
I say lots of things before we start recording.
right. Well, one of the things you'd said before we started recording. How many times can I say before we started recording? Before we started recording.
Before we started
talking-
recording, you said you're going to say this.
right. But before we started recording, you were saying that's a record. Sorry, listener.
No, this is a podcast.
It's all going to be cut out.
It's all going to be cut out. The listener isn't going to hear anything we have to say. But before we started recording, you said that now I'm going to get the giggles. You said that it almost felt like our heroes were too casual
About everything.
about shooting enemies, about walking through, about being so at ease and never legitimately feeling like they were in danger.
Yeah, there wasn't as much challenge as I like in a film.
And I would say this is a legitimate criticism of this film.
Yeah.
Right, I agree.
It,
This is
it
why I
was
bring it up.
very
Yeah.
entertaining, but
Only
the-
one
the-
good guy got shot.
Right.
They killed
Yeah,
all of the
you're
Nazis
right.
got killed except
because we
one
kept
dude
making
got
calls
shot.
that people
Yeah.
it was going to be like a Suicide Squad where people are going to start dropping.
And of course, there's the Irish guy. Sorry, I got to say this. Yeah.
and
County Cork. Shout
and
out.
the protagonists were built up as so good at
Yeah.
their job because
Right.
without spoiling anything, they kind of had a pre-op
Right.
Yeah, right.
where they just sailed through like they were hot knives through butter.
Right.
I felt a little bit of tension towards the end during like the big climactic gunfight scene. That's not spoiling anything. And I thought, okay, maybe something here is going to go like really wrong, and
Nothing.
It went pretty well. It was still fun to watch.
But it was it almost felt like it was too easy and it didn't build up the tension.
They were playing on
in the
God
way-
mode.
Right,
They
right.
turned
it
all
was.
the codes on and just
All the
couldn't
cheat
get
codes.
All the cheat codes. Yeah.
So that's I think one legitimate criticism. I still really enjoyed this film, so I understand.
Yeah. Oh,
like
for
I'm
sure.
coming
Still
from a place,
watch
so
it,
yeah.
but-
the other criticism I got is like we had a almost like a 30-second introduction and overview of all these characters and their motivations. And it was like, oh yeah, this guy had a family member that was tortured by Nazis. This guy had a family member that was killed by Nazis.
Yeah,
This guy,
yeah.
and like that was all the background we ever really got
Yeah.
to understand who these people were.
Something. I mean, I'm a history buff, and particularly World War II. One of the things I would have liked more was a little bit more reason why this op mattered.
Right.
That would have been really fun. I would have loved to see that.
Because
The context.
there was kind of a minute talking about it, but I don't think,
Right.
especially an American audience, really understood why they had to
Right.
blow up this Nazi base.
And
It
if
got
you
kind of boiled down to U-boat bad.
Well, yeah, I think if
Not-
you,
not to-
yeah, I think if like Brian, I'm a history nerd also, and I had some context that like understood like the UK was importing a lot of food, was importing a lot of munitions, a lot of just general goods during World War II. They couldn't import from the European continent. They had to ship in from colonies and then also from North America. And U-boats, the German Navy,
Yeah.
they understood they could never defeat the Royal Navy on surface-to-surface combat. So they were looking for a strategic advantage, and the submarines were it. And the submarines were extremely effective at pirating shipping and just striking a lot of terror into regular merchantmen that were involved in this trade.
And Britain, as Americans will understand this, Britain has no native oil fields.
Right.
None.
So without oil shipments from America,
Right.
they couldn't power their planes to stop the Nazi bombers that were blowing up their cities.
Right.
That plus food, plus steel, plus rubber.
Right. But you're right. There were these critical goods that they needed, and even with some of the advantages they had scientifically, radar, etc., and frankly, really well designed aircraft. They needed oil. They needed food. They had a lot, and so there was a really great need, and a lot of counter strategy of putting merchants into convoys with armed escorts,
Right.
and depth charges and other ways to try and confuse torpedoes.
And at this point, America was not in the war.
correct,
So they were providing goods.
Lend lease,
But they were really theoretically selling the goods to
Right.
to Britain. But
Right.
once it got on a ship, it was British, so it was fair target for Nazi U-boats,
Right.
submarines.
and all of that, I think, would have helped to understand. And maybe a British audience, who, if this movie was intended, they just would
Right,
know.
right.
They would just know. Oh yeah, okay. We had the Blitz. We had this point in our history, but Americans or international audiences might not be as familiar.
The trailer really sold it as a big blow up action movie it really downplayed all the spycraft we saw and all the like really tense, quiet scenes, which I love that were in there.
And it was a great action movie. It was
phenomenal.
Superbly entertaining film.
Oh, yeah.
But as a history buff, I wanted a little more.
It's
And-
fictionalized. It's a lot of fictionalizing going on.
Right, right.
And so they, like with most war based on real people films, at the end they did show at least 3 or 4 of the main characters. And
Right.
that these are based on real people, and this is, you know, what they were doing at that time and then post-war and all that, which was interesting because I know that's it's sort of documentary like, but not really. I mean, because it's like
Based on a true story.
It's based on a true story, but very fictionalized at this point because of you know, just I mean, there's a scene in it where there's the officers' party and they're playing music. And the music they're playing is big band jazz music, which you would never play.
Well, it was more West Coast, like 1950s, like Miles Davis. It was like 10 years in the future.
Yeah, I was like, that's a little out of character, but that's okay because everyone was in costume, and you're just like, this makes no sense.
They cut out the scene where Michael J. Fox says, "You won't get it, but your kids will." Yeah, and then he leaves to get on a boat to go 88 knots an hour.
Marty, that was such interesting music you're playing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at the costumes to kind of identify of like, you know, cultural context, that point in history. And I think I saw like the Wizard of Oz lion.
We saw Frankenstein.
We saw Frankenstein. And then there's
those films predated
Cowboy.
the war,
Right.
So those were not anachronistic.
We saw a classic cowboy. We
and
saw
the Pagliacci clown,
right.
which was a Italian opera that was turn of the century.
And so I think that was well done. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna criticize this movie too harshly for like the anachronistic stuff. I mean, some of the music was a little too peppy and jazzy for the time because it was like Benny Goodman at the time. It was not John Coltrane.
Bebop, yeah.
Right.
But that's okay. I think it lent to the feel and the vibe that they were going for.
Yeah.
And the action sequences, it utilized music pretty well.
Yeah.
But again, it's just the no reload. You didn't see anyone reload. You saw a couple of them dropping clips and then putting new ones in.
No, Dan, he got the arrow back out of that Nazi and shot another Nazi.
Yeah.
With the
same
bow and arrow.
I really, really enjoyed when the 3 of them were going to free Appleby.
Apple. They just call him
just
Apple.
Apple. Yeah. Free Gus's friend Apple.
Appleyard.
Thank you. And the 3 of them were watching them. So how do we get in? We got this. We got here's some guards. We got these guys. And then the Dane, correct?
Yes.
Alan Richson. I'll get the name
Richson,
right
I think.
Reacher, for anyone who watches Reacher.
Anders Lassen is the name of the character.
Yes.
Right. Just dropping Nazis with his bow and arrow. Nope. And at a point, he just walks off. Gus just says, "All right, Lars,
Okay, we're just gonna follow him."
Lars, just walk off without any support or anything cool." And then he just starts dropping dudes.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, that works, sort of.
I mean, mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the scenes where it was so fun to watch, but I just thought there's not really any stakes here. They're cruising through. Granted, they did later utilize some disguising tactics to throw Nazis off just long enough to blap, drop them.
So one thing I want to ask is the person of Winston Churchill has been portrayed in so many different movies.
Very often.
By so many different actors, you know, in so many different stories. How does this relate to other portrayals of Winston Churchill that we've seen?
Not terribly good, from my opinion.
I
I've seen
agree.
a lot better.
I would say The Darkest Hour with Gary Oldman is a real standout as far as a portrayal of Churchill. Yeah.
Sorry, Roy Kinnear. Half the boys at a movie and a beer don't care for it.
Yeah.
But he's like a classic British actor. He was on the stage. I liked it. I thought it fit the tone well.
He was fine. The movie was not about him. He was tangential to the story.
The gentleman who is the lieutenant colonel or whatever, that actually was the one who was calling most of the shots and trying to get them together. And
Carrie Eula's character. Yeah.
Who has been in a lot of amazing things over the years. And I saw him and I was like, isn't he in Princess Bride? Isn't he?
Yeah, Dan looked over. That's Wesley, right? Like, oh yeah, definitely. That's part of why I wanted to watch this movie.
Yeah, and
like,
he's very straight laced in this.
Yeah.
Whereas he's often a kind of a comic.
He's a goofball.
Well, that was one of the great scenes to set the tone was him bringing in Gus, and every time Gus does something like cheeky and clearly pocketing cigars and stealing lighters, he just rolls his eyes like
whatever.
Just his face says it all. Just, oh my God, I'm working with this guy. All right, well, I have to. Yeah, Ian Fleming as a character appears, and he notices he steals his lighter, looks at him like, don't worry about it. Just let him do his thing.
Right. Yeah, we need him and his people.
Yeah.
Right.
Which bit of trivia, which I didn't know the movie mentioned, I saw it on IMDb before the movie wrapped up because I'm easily distracted. Ian Fleming based his character James Bond on Gus, on the lead character. Which, if Cavill was anywhere close to how he acted, I could see it.
Ian Fleming famously served in I think it was called the Office of Strategic Services back in the day.
Oh,
Special
right.
services, maybe more recently.
SAS.
Right. And based a lot of the storylines for James Bond and kind of the setup and even, the character James Bond himself on wartime experiences he had in this kind of spy sort of world. And I don't think all the stories he wrote are true, but there's grains of truth in them.
You mean that he didn't go to space in Moonraker?
Yeah, well, no, that part was true. That actually,
okay.
He did that actually on a
That
Thursday.
tracks.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Thursday is best day for going to space. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, the flights are cheaper on Mondays and Thursdays. You didn't know that?
Well, no, it's common knowledge. Right.
Yeah. From a filmmaking standpoint, good use of music. The night shots were kind of interesting because there's a lot of they did most of the second half of the film is done at night. So it's not it's not like a lot of time. Yeah, it takes place when the parties are going, and so there's not a lot of time jumping, which I appreciate. So it's like, oh, this is sort of real time with a little bit of skipping, but that makes it interesting because then it's like, oh, it's not 5 days later. It's like, well, what happened? It actually shows you what happened.
Yeah, I mean, there was a ticking clock from the very beginning to the end of the film, and the whole thing takes place over maybe a week, and then when they found out the fleet was leaving port early, they sped it up
3 days early,
and then it was really compressed, and it was over 48 hours.
I was glad they skipped the sailing. I was worried we're
gonna have to be at sea with them,
like some
time.
kind of montage of them sailing.
I like sailing.
Yeah, but that's not why I'm watching this movie.
I like the ocean.
Go watch Master and Commander then.
I will. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Black Sails is also a really good one if you like old school.
Yeah, that's a fine film or series, really.
TV show. Yeah.
I was going to say, the acting here is generally very good.
Filmmaking at night, so we close this one out.
Yeah.
One thing I appreciated, everything was well lit. I could see everything.
Right.
But it still felt like it was night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It felt like natural lighting, which, well done.
Yeah.
Right. There's a balance there for sure. It's dark, but can the viewer really assess everything that's going on? Are they going to miss any details?
Because we have to know the stakes, and if I can't see anybody, also you are paying for Cavill and all these other big names. Like put some light on them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you were going to say about the acting area.
I think aside from Churchill has been represented so many times, and sometimes excellently. These characters, the reactions and responses, the way people were moving, the acting altogether, I thought was fairly good.
I'd agree with that.
Overall, I think it's well acted. I like the pacing of the movie generally, and I also like how humor. There's many different jokes that are sort of interspersed, sometimes even just visual gags that work and don't distract, but they lighten the mood when it needs to happen.
The writing was very clean.
Yes,
there wasn't a lot of excess nonsense to build to the punchline.
Right.
Yeah. So in thinking about, would there be any room to cut? What would you cut? Would there be scenes that didn't apply or didn't really add anything to it? And I was, as I was watching it, I was thinking about this is all really fairly relevant.
Yeah, we were before.
A lot of the story just moves the plot along.
Right,
it's a very straight road. There's not a lot of detours.
We were saying before that we actually wanted more context of the historical situation that Britain was in at this moment. And why this was so important. So not really cutting anything. We wanted to add stuff, but
I think and that might have helped some of the Blake's problem, which is all of our problems, was that nothing felt really at stake.
There wasn't enough tension.
There wasn't enough tension. We felt like they were going to sail through this the whole time.
Right,
and they did.
Guy Ritchie tends to make a pretty tight film. He doesn't leave a lot of excess fat for the viewers to watch.
Right. But this is a 2-hour movie. There's a lot of content.
And it didn't feel like
it's a lean chunk of meat.
Yeah.
A lean 2-hour chunk of meat.
Superman saves the day.
I'm hungry all of a sudden.
For sausage and cabbage and black bread?
And they let... I forgot about the train scene. That was great. That was some of the fun. I love that we didn't really see this two-pronged approach. We got to see a lot of the spy craft that team doing their thing. They didn't interact with Gus and his boys until I think the end.
So,
Really,
listener, there was an advance party of 2 characters sent to this location before the rest of the team showed up.
yes, played by Isa Gonzalez, Marjorie Stewart, and Babs Olusanmokan
As Heron. Yep.
Yeah.
So Heron and Marjorie are sent as an advance team. And actually, I kind of like, because it would be so tempting to just, we got this information, the ship's going to leave for 3 days early. But no, they show how that was ascertained. They show it communicating back to HR. They kind of show like the risk that this advanced team is taking. And I think there's almost more attention there in that.
Way more attention.
Right. Absolutely.
Because, when
And they actually were more at stake.
Right.
It just wasn't followed to
yeah.
a better conclusion.
By the time guns blazing, the rest of the team shows up and they're, shooting everybody. Like, then that tension is almost more relaxed, even though there's a lot more violence and a lot more action going on.
It almost feels like there were 2 movies they sort of put together, which I know, and when you say that about a lot of other films, that's a criticism to say, it's like Hancock. That was actually 2 different screenplays they put together. Now the movie suffers for it. But here it feels like
it's richer for it.
Yeah. I took a look at the writers, 4 screenplay writers, which can be a problem. But I think Guy Ritchie's worked with them before, so he's probably told them, here's a tone I want to go for. We want tension, we want fun action. The movie opens with them like being fired upon and then going, getting closer. Yeah, I'll be fine. You got the bombs, right? Yeah, we got the bombs.
So
Get closer.
What does this
like
make?
intense personal courage in the face of fire,
Yeah,
like to a man, like everybody.
What did this? I mean, look up on your little screen there. What did this do domestically? Did it make enough money to pay for itself?
It's still in theaters, isn't it?
Is it?
I think so,
believe
yeah.
I think it just came out last week.
Or 2 weeks ago?
Maybe?
It came out on streaming the same time it got released in the theaters, I think.
That's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off.
Yeah. Well, it's well done. I don't think they skimped on anything. Most of the costuming, other than the costumes, looked authentic. Old German tanks and vehicles and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And boats.
So the budget was $60 million estimated.
Pounds or?
It shows $.
Okay.
Opening weekend U.S. and Canada, 8,913,690. God, that's so many numbers. I should have had Aaron do this. He works on
just tell us how many millions rounding to the nearest million.
So if we're running up, then 9.
Okay.
9 million.
And
So
then gross
it's
U.S. and Canada, 20. So it's not quite making what it spent, but it's doing.
But
it'll break even
Yeah.
internationally eventually.
I-
But
so-
it's a slow start.
So the appeal, there's German, there's a little Italian, and a little Spanish being spoken. There's
French.
And French, and there's
No darn Americans. Slam, slam, slam.
yeah. So it's interesting that they did 4 subs for some of it, but not for all of it. So
Right.
subtitling that was already there. You don't have to turn it on. Most of the German was all subbed. Not all of it. They use their funny, stupid accent and say, they try to pretend to be German as they walk around in their uniforms. Yeah. And it's like, they just. But if you think about it, if you're that guy on patrol, nothing ever happens. It's super boring.
Right.
And you see some officer and another soldier coming up, you're going to be like, oh, hey, what's up? You're not going to just.
You see the hat, you see the jacket. And you're like, all right, well, this is routine as always.
Yeah. So from the walking through the scenes and just knocking people out, they're not expecting it unless you are alerted.
And that makes sense. I'm cool with that.
I don't know what's going on.
It's like playing Metal Gear Solid. If they don't know you're coming, you just drop them. All right, cool, done.
Well,
Let's get
you have to have a passable accent, though. I mean, if you're...
Well, that's why they had the silenced guns ready when his English-ass accent just goes...
Well, I know. I mean,
Sorry
if you're
for swearing.
speaking in German and your accent is not convincing, like that would...
That was a pivotal subtitle thing that I'm just going to leave it there in case viewers want to watch and not be spoiled. But they use that to good effect.
Pay attention to the mistress, Marjorie. She uses language really effectively against the Nazi officer her job is to get the guy, convince him to like not be out at the dock and to do what she wants him to do.
To manipulate him. Yeah.
She manipulates him really well because she's like, oh, you're into S&M, you're into violence, so I can play that dominatrix. And she's like,
I can play rough.
I can play rough. And he's like, you're going to put this on and you're going to do what I say. And he's like, okay.
And that was shown in the. That was also shown in when they met at the bar, and she got really aggressive. And I felt all of us kind of get tense, thinking, "Oh no,
is she going too
She
hard?
overplayed her hand. Yeah.
Yeah, but she didn't. I mean, and so there is a part where she's singing a song at the party, and she drops a hint. Pay attention to what she does.
That's why I said what I said and just dropped it.
Yeah. Pay attention to what she does, because she, I think, is playing him even more,
right,
and not doing it by accident. Everything is very purposeful with her.
She's using substantial wiles,
yes,
in all senses. Yeah, I'm going to say, sounds like we've got, amongst all of us, 8 thumbs up.
Yes, it's a good film. I have
8 thumbs up. I would say no CG that I saw.
Right,
very little.
Guy Ritchie don't use
CG.
CG.
A lot of practical effects, explosions and such, but it made it feel like
authentic
war movie. Yeah,
yeah.
And we also enjoyed some beer.
So when you're at
Not a lot of drinking in this movie, except for a couple of cocktails, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there were spritzers and stuff during the day because it's hot out.
You saw the German soldiers at the club drinking big Mosskrugs of beer. I saw that a few times.
I did not catch that.
Yeah.
Well, in the intro scene,
Nicely done, Dan. Nicely done.
Yeah.
our protagonist was drinking some Johnny Walker Red Label.
Yes.
Before he pocketed a bunch of cigars.
Yes. And he was questioning, like,
God, what a great scene.
why is the good stuff out? He was like, why am I here, and why is there good alcohol right here?
Because you just dragged me out of prison.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, while I'm here, pocket.
Yeah.
Right.
So
when you're at sea, you need something to drink because the ocean water will dehydrate.
Really part you.
Yeah. It'll kill you fast.
Water
Slow.
everywhere, and not a drop to drink.
Yeah. So we will move on to talking about beer.
We had lots of drops
this
to drink.
moment. So thanks for hanging in there, everybody, so far. We had a Newcastle Brown Ale and a Monterey Bay Football Club.
It's like listening to movie beer is an endurance sport.
It is.
It's a little self-deprecating, and I love it. I love him for it.
So I looked up. We haven't had Newcastle Brown for an episode yet, and I really wanted to do it for one of the British films we've watched in the past. I had it available, but we didn't do it. And I was like, all right. I had a couple of different options, and this was the one we went with.
Yeah.
I think it went well. I sipped mine really slow. I wanted it to warm up. I wanted it to get more normal, tepid. Like,
well, I thought it's nutty, and it got more nutty as it warmed up a little bit.
Which that's pretty standard for brown, right? Like it's
right out of the bottle, it was a little bit thin flavor wise.
Yeah.
So that might be why I killed mine so fast and had a second one to compare to make sure it still kept working.
So the word to the wise is, if you see Newcastle Brown Ale on the shelf and it says it's import, they're lying. Everything you find in America is made either in Chicago or made in California. It has been sold as a label to another brewery to make.
Like licensed.
It's been licensed. Yes, it's been licensed to someone in the U.S. to make. They do still make it at the brewery, not the original brewery, but where they moved to, like back in the 70s, I think it said, to a location where they're actually still producing it. Back before the label was sold or the licensed, they were doing like 10 million gallons a year. Whoa. And now it's down to like 2 million gallons a year locally for export out of the UK.
That's kind of a bummer.
It's still like one of the top 5 produced and distributed. It's just not really drank that much in country as far as, because there's so many other beers that are of the same style and stuff. It's not as popular as we see it here in the US because there aren't any majorly made brown ales that are available across the US consistently made that I know of. I've never seen any other than Newcastle.
You and I have discussed this like off the podcast, and my friend Richard is a big fan of brown ales, and just they're just fewer.
They're hard to find. It's not a popular style. It kind of fell out of favor a long time ago,
which I'm kind of sad about because I've always liked it. At least during like the fall, colder spring, it's a really good, just comforting beer for those kinds of that kind of season. A little tougher during the summer, but
so this version of it, and I don't know from what I read, it's not necessarily the absolute exact same recipe. They are importing in the British ingredients, but again, stuff travels. It's not going to be exactly the same. It's different water profile. Unless they're treating it and trying to make exactly the same beer, it's going to be different. And I think it is a little different from what I remember it being years ago.
From what I understand,
I would agree.
Yeah. From what I understand, they do sing soccer hooligan songs at it to help make it taste more British.
It's like talking to your plants.
Yeah. But he's just screaming "oi, oi, oi," ziggy zaggy over and over.
And then every once in a while saying "go."
Yeah.
for a long time.
Really, really.
And then,
long time.
so Dan looped that for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
We'll never have an audience again.
I'll keep listening.
There's some caramel and some nut flavor that Aaron really, he's like, it tastes really nutty to me. And the low bitterness really helps with that. And there is hop flavor. It's not super, super present. But
Yeah, I didn't get any hop flavor, or I didn't get any caramel either. But
Yeah.
I also drank
Caramel.
mine cold. So
it's
might have
you
just
didn't let
missed
yours
it.
warm up. You
Nah.
drink yours way too fast.
it's my Friday.
It's like caramel apple kind of.
That does sound pretty great.
Yeah,
And-
no, it's nice.
And I think
Fall
that there's a
flavors.
touch of
Yin and yang.
minerality with it. So that's like an ode back to, English water profile.
That I feel
tends
like
to
I
have
got a little bit
minerality.
of.
And it's going to be a little bit sweeter than other browns you're going to find. Moose Drool is a brown ale you can find here on the West Coast out
yeah.
from Big Sky Brewing in Montana. That's the only other one that I know of that's out on this end of the country that's like produced at this level or at the amount that you can find it in grocery stores all over the place.
Right.
Constantly.
Okay, Google, tell me about brown ales.
I was about to reference, I think Old Dog, but I think that's East Coast.
Yeah.
That's
So
Dan's showing me how I messed up his personal device.
Yeah, I have
by
my
my joke,
note taker here, and he's like telling my phone to do stuff.
but it's hilarious.
I think it's pretty great.
It is hilarious. I'm going to shut that off. All right. So
It's like Terminator 2 in here.
brown ales exist. I made a brown ale recently as a home brewer
Yeah,
that
it was great.
is based off of a similar Newcastle, but the British version of the Newcastle brown that I think is a little bit more has more body and stands up a little bit better.
I
than
would
this.
agree with
This
that
is a
because
little
I had
sweeter.
Dan's brown ale before the Newcastle.
It's known as the James's Brown remix.
Yeah, man.
Named
taste-
after my brother James, who is a music teacher, and
And dear
Seems
listener,
and
if
goes.
you're interested in the James Brown
you just
brew,
reach out.
come to Dan's basement.
Yeah, reach out.
Don't tell him, just walk into his house.
Yeah. I think this went really well. As it warmed up, it got a little bit fuller, I guess you would say. Not flatter, but it just kind of rounded out more, which is appropriate. I liked it. I've had this many times over the years and decades. I like brown ale. So for me, it was a good go. I didn't mind it.
It just struck me the way that this film has the tense spycraft scenes and the boys' night out action scenes. This beer does the same thing. When it starts out as cold, pretty good beer, a little bit nutty, but it's a brown ale, no big deal. And then as it warms up, it has a more a sophisticated body. There's more happening. It really reflects how this movie has kind of two tones throughout most of it.
Yeah. So, Aaron, are you finding anything about brown ales online?
I guess Deschutes has a new brown ale that's the same as its own brown ale.
Okay.
Yeah, now, not a lot of copy on the bottle here.
No,
Well,
it's-
no,
Well, maybe
yeah,
we can name check brewed and
Oh.
bottled and seen a man about a dog at Lagunitas
Lagunitas Brewing is who does it.
in Petaluma, California, and Chicago, Illinois.
Rogue evidently has something they're calling hazelnut brown nectar.
Ooh,
Yes,
That's out of Newport.
They've made that
interested.
before. I've had that. That's a seasonal hit and miss. And it's I think a higher alcohol beer. I don't think it's a lower alcohol beer. It's not. It's not around 4%. It's a bigger one.
So, listener, just as a transplant to Oregon, I'm going to tell you one of the really weirdest things about this state is that they mislabel hazelnuts.
Yes,
They will call them filberts for no discernible reason.
because that's what they're called here.
And it's just local insanity. It's this weird cultural in-group thing that a filbert is something that you're going to put in your mouth. No, it's a hazelnut. You're going to eat a hazelnut.
well, Philbert's a turtle on Rocco's Modern Life.
Correct.
Hi, I'm your Rocco's Modern Life expert, Blake.
Okay, so we had Newcastle Brown Ale, and it was good. What's our other beer?
Yay! The second beer that we tried for the film was called Land and Sea XPA, and this is also out of California.
Yar.
Alvarado Street Brewing. We've had beers from them before on the podcast. They're really available at most finer can and bottle shops here in the Portland area. I don't know if you're going to find Alvarado at the grocery store. Doubtful, because there's too many local stuff that they're going to put on the shelf before this out of California.
Right. You said we've had this brewery's beer on
Yes.
the podcast before.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We've had a hazy from them before, I believe.
Nice.
This is a brewery that I buy beer from at John's Marketplace, or I want to say Cerveza carries them periodically, and I definitely know that they have them at Bridgetown Beer House.
That might be where I've seen them. You buy this pretty regularly, so that's a stamp of approval from Dan.
They do
that's a big deal.
good beer. I've never had a bad beer from them, even stuff that's not been out of a cooler.
Wow.
I'm going to admit to that. So this beer was made in conjunction with the Monterey Bay Football Club. So this is the official club beer, I believe.
That's so cool.
It's not MLS level. It's one level below that.
Yeah, you're saying it's like a
called.
feeder team. Like get their chops worked up before they go to the major leagues.
Yeah. So this is 100% Nelson Sauvon, and it's at 5%. So 6% and above is IPA. 6% and below.
That's right.
Is a pale ale.
I always forget there's that just cutoff. It seems weird to me that there's a cutoff.
Yeah, and the X, I don't know what the X stands for, extra something, but it is literally a single hop beer.
Well, it says extra pale ale on the can.
Yeah,
that's probably a good clue.
What does extra mean, though?
What does that mean? Yeah.
Extra
It's
what?
even paler than other pale ales.
Maybe.
It has mutant abilities.
Did
like
we
an
pour
X-Men.
it in a glass to see
We
what
did
it looked
not.
like?
No,
I didn't.
We suck.
I believe it's pale ale.
That's okay.
I choose to believe.
It was a fun movie. We were distracted.
we were.
So Nelson Sauvon is a hop that's out of the south of the equator. It's out of, I believe, either New Zealand or Australia, one of the two. I can't remember exactly which of those islands it's from, but it is from an island.
And both of those countries were part of the British Commonwealth, so they fought on the side of Britain in the war.
Yes,
sure did.
they did. And it just seemed like, oh, this is a cool looking, it's an interesting can. It has some interesting, line art on it. It does have the symbol from the football club plus the bear from the flag of the state of California.
Oh, I was going to
think
say
that's
there's
what the bear
chevrons
is.
all over this can.
Okay,
No,
so
yeah,
I think-
yeah, the
I think
bear
that's the
symbol.
club.
Yes,
the
yeah,
bear symbol is
that's the California bear, the golden bear.
The golden bear
From their state flag,
and
right?
then the crest from the football club is what the chevrons are on, and that's what's on the front of the can. So, yeah, it looks interesting. I enjoyed it. It was a little hoppy up front, and then it kind of settled down as you drank it. The Nelson Sauvon, again, is super juicy. It can be used in New England style IPAs. It typically isn't because it does have a little bit of floral hit on the back. But overall, this is also a really interesting and nice beer to let warm up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it helped with the flavor profile some. But
I clearly liked it enough that I went to the fridge
Looking for
like a
another.
raccoon pawing for more, and Dan had to inform me that there was only 4 of them. Like,
yeah.
okay.
I thought I had 6, but I only had 4 of these. I have 6 of another beer.
Is there any copy on this can?
There is some.
It's a bit blurry.
It is a bit blurry. You could just read what's on the tablet in front of you.
Oh, this is actually what it says on the can. So it's
Yes.
the same thing. Two forces coming together to build a community, to build a club. Beer and soccer have long been a common thread that brings people together of all backgrounds and walks of life. Alvarado Street Brewery is proud to partner with Monterey Bay FC to craft this electrifying extra pale ale to celebrate the world's game and our home professional football club. Jam-packed with juicy, tropical Nelson Sauvon hops and a crisp, refreshing finish. Oh, this is so much easier to read than the can.
And cleats.
And yes, Salinas,
So now, what if
California.
Gilbert Gottfried read that? No, I'm kidding.
It has
We
a
would shoot
blonde.
him. We would shoot him dead.
I do a pretty good Gilbert Gottfried. I'm
We'll
not going to lie.
shoot
or
you
nothing.
too, just like the movie taught us to.
I'm not a Nazi.
Anyway,
I will say, was getting almost like this fruitiness, like kind of raspberry, almost like the hops are fruity in this.
I didn't get raspberry, but I was getting like a really tangy fruit flavor from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
so this was canned on January 3rd, 2024. So it is a few months
It's a
old.
little old, yeah.
But that's okay. If
So
it
is
was
Henry Cavill.
refrigerated, and it seemed like I didn't get any off flavors, we're good
No,
to go.
It sounds
It
like
tasted
skunky.
great.
I think it's,
No.
yeah.
I think it was a smart call having that for the later half of the film.
Yeah, when the body count rose.
When the body count
yeah.
just skyrocketed.
Oh, there's 500 we have to
Explosions
kill
were
instead of
happening.
200 now. It's just like
Explosions are happening. There's a lot of
Yeah.
big boom action. I think it went well with that portion. It would have been weird to have that early in the film,
Right.
and then be sipping the brown ale later, going, "This isn't really sync up at all."
The brown
so
ale's
good
more
call on the order, Dan.
more easygoing, more slow burn on the
yeah.
brown ale. Kind of, it's like
you're
taking,
at sea.
Nice
And then-
setup.
And then the extra pale ale, it's like when you're ready to stop thinking and just enjoy the spectacle of the action of this movie. it's good to switch to
As a man worse than Nazis running around dressed like Caesar.
like the worst Nazi.
The worst.
There was kind of some visual humor in that, though. That he's dressed
it
in
was
this
great.
costume.
I'm fully approving of that scene. That was great. It's
Right.
like, this is silly. I love
Where's
it.
Brutus going to stab him?
That's why he had all those guns.
Yeah, no doubt. Great film. I think we can recommend it to people.
Oh, yeah.
Later teenage years. There's not a lot. There's no nudity. There's a little bit of language.
Yeah, the raciest outfit Ms. Gonzalez wears is still relatively tame.
Looks like Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Kind of a backless gown.
And the violence is not anything different than any other violent movie you're going to see today. People getting shot. There's blood splurting a little bit.
A lot of violence, but not a lot of gore.
I was going to say, rate this how you would rate James Bond. It's largely kind of
the one exception being that shot where they opened the blinds and we saw the room.
Yeah,
And
there's sort of a
I'm
graphic
kind of
scene.
surprised, but it only did the one time. So I almost forgot it happened because
Right.
they didn't really keep harkening back to it. But
well, it did plant a seed in our mind of like,
Yes.
who is this person? Who is this antagonist?
and who's our heroine going to be dealing with?
and that does end up creating some tension later
agreed.
as she's interacting with him.
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's never followed through.
Right.
Really.
Yeah, it's kind of
that's the problem.
I don't want to call it a red herring exactly, but it's not capitalized on in the way that it could have been.
A mauve herring,
Yes.
Talp.
a mauve carp.
You know,
This is 64 crayons and a beer.
All right, so guys,
I'll listen to that.
if you guys can check out my band Mauve Carp at the we're playing a basement show.
All right. This film takes place around a lot of water, and
It's true.
We
and
weren't-
beer's made with water.
Beer's made from water,
So we win.
We win.
But so is water. Water is made with water.
Oh God, I start freaking out.
Hold on, the ocean's made of mostly water
Mostly
and fish
salt.
poop.
And fish poop. A
and
lot
salts
of fish poop.
and fish poop
And Cthulhu slumbering until he needs to awaken.
Yes.
and however much oil Exxon.
And if you don't drink fish poop, you'll
I don't know.
dehydrate.
You just need to hydrate. You just need to hydrate. as much as
don't drink
possible.
fish poop.
Yeah.
I fully blanked on how to adjust it to hydrate.
Anyway,
I freaked out, guys.
As always, the opinions expressed during the taping of this recording are those of the hosts. And thank you again for hanging in there with us. And check this movie out if you can. See it in the theater. I think would be good. Good to stream it at home too.
If you watch it at home, watch it with some friends.
Yeah,
I
it's
could
good
see
fun.
myself.
movie.
Yeah, I could see myself enjoying this alone. But it was a really good time hanging with the boys, and I missed you guys. We haven't gotten to record together as a whole. What's the quartet as a quartet in a minute?
Yeah. So check this film out. Find some good beers. Find a German beer or British beer or
Italian.
Spanish beer or an Italian beer. Something foreign to start with, and then kind of move into something you really like. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Be foreign at first.
Or drink a cognac and smoke a cigar like Churchill did.
Yes.
Like everyone's least favorite Churchill in this movie.
Anyway, thanks for hanging in, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode.
All right, this is Aaron. Thanks for listening. And if you have the chance to learn Swedish in order to pose as a Swede, it might be a good idea to go and get on that.
This is Blake saying you should really watch Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and then Snatch like back to back. So it's a really good companion pieces by Guy Ritchie.
And this is Brian. Please don't be a Nazi.
And with that, we'll say adieu. Take care, everyone.
You should also
next
watch
time.
Rock and Roller. It's pretty good, but underrated.
Yeah.